Die Oshkortensjagen, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is German for the Austrian phrase, to pull the butt card.
Wait, sorry. German for the Austrian phrase?
Yeah, it's the German language.
Oh, but it's only said in Austria, basically. This is like...
That's what the internet tells me. Yes.
Okay.
To pull the butt card means to have bad luck.
Oh, man, I pulled the butt card.
I believe it's from soccer, the ref taking the red card from their back pocket.
That's true. Okay.
The whole rest of the F1 field has been having bad luck compared to Red Bull. But let's see if things turn around at Red Bull's home track, huh? I'm Drew Scanlon, joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
I'm good. Yeah, you've spoiler. That's what I'm going to get into when we do our track walk later on. Yeah, we're into a fun little European cycle here. I think we only have 1 week off between now and the end of the F1. I guess the start of the F1 break at the start of August. It's a back-to-back Euro races. So I know you're a big fan of Eurovision, Drew. So you must be loving this. Absolutely.
Also joining us, Rob Zachney. How are you, Rob?
Not too bad. Austria's kind of moved up my power rankings of F1 races, in recent years. So I genuinely am pretty stoked. Also, we always get the great photography.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Indeed. Well, if you're new to this podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we have an episode just for you. Our preseason primer assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that and get caught up, it's episode 216. Also, the show is supported entirely by our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons, covering racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing things, and a lot of weird things. So if you... Did I say racing things?
Racing things.
Series. And racing things.
Racing things.
So if you'd like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. It's like I'm a game show host saying the rules. It's like one long word about Patreon. But speaking of that, what's going on this month in Patreon land, Danny?
It's like me with the title sponsors. No, I'm very excited about this next episode of the Patreon exclusive podcast. It's going to be a week later than we originally planned. It'll be out next week. We just had a lot going on, all of us. Rob had to start a new job at his old job. Drew's been working hard on video game stuff. I was trying to launch a driving video game, actually. I never once mentioned Stunt Derby on this podcast this entire time.
Yeah, let's cross promote, baby.
What an idiot I am. It's like
wish list now.
Thousands of check out Stunt Derby on Steam. We should do a little playtest. I should get you guys in on it.
Yeah.
So we'll have it out next week. I am very excited about what the patrons voted for. The options on the table were The Crew, which got 25%.
That was the NASCAR sitcom.
Yes, which thank the good Lord we did not land on. Duel with 21%. Go Fast, Risk Everything, which is in all caps. What is that?
It's my autobiography.
That is, Ken Block biography.
Oh, interesting. Okay, is it new?
It came out, I think, in 2022. It was about their championship run.
Oh,
I think. Yeah.
Okay, but it was before. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
That got 14%. But bringing it home with 40%, a movie that Rob Zachney has only just in recent hours realized is directed by Steven Soderbergh, Logan Lucky.
Magic Mike is one of my favorite Soderbergh movies. Like, I genuinely think that movie is just like pitch perfect. Every performance in it is incredibly dialed in. And
Agreed.
So when I saw this, I was like, wait, this is Tatum, this is Soderbergh, Adam Driver is in it. Like, this is
Daniel Craig.
This is Hillbilly Oceans.
It is 100%
Absolutely.
Hillbilly
and I was
Oceans.
like, how did I not know of this? How am I finding out years later? I put the trailer on, and MK was like across the room, and she was like, what is this? Are we going to go see that? And I'm like, no, because the time to go see it was like 6 years ago, but we're going to watch it.
It was, for me, it was one of those like Thursday night, my wife has gone to bed early movies, and I was like, I'll give it a go, and then was just enthralled. Like, when you go in with zero expectations, I think this movie does really well. Especially because there's Daniel Craig with like a, I don't know, is it a Tennessee accent? Or
it is proto Benoit Blanc is what it is.
Benoit.
So you've seen it as well, Drew?
Benoit, yes. I have, yeah.
Oh, good stuff. We're going to have so much fun with this one. I cannot wait. I'm dying to see it again. So that'll be a lot of fun. Massive thanks to all of our incredible title sponsors: Cyphers Training, Turf SCS, Alex Medina, Kick a Hat of the Art at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, IronStation.dev, TelemetryDeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foot, Abdullah Althani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us. That's a podcast that JP, one of our patrons,
is.
It is, yeah. If you like NASA, it's about NASA. It's not about what else is above us. Clouds, birds, the good Lord. It's not about those things. It's about NASA. Bunny Crimes, Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Faltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, Umberto Roca, William Romph, Irvine, Clinical, Research, Lachlan the Madden Man, and of course, Jason Kelly.
Indeed. And those are our title sponsors. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Hey, everyone. Not just people listening. Hey, everyone. Thank you.
Danny, thanks you.
Thank you, Drew. Thanks, Rob.
Well, let's jump right into the news ahead of Austria here. We've pulled a number of, speaking of heists and money, a lot of money-related news going on.
You're right.
And movies and actors. Danny, why don't you take this one at the top here?
Yeah, I guess not satisfied with ruining the competition in the lower leagues of English football.
Oh, wow. Is that how we see it?
No, I actually really like these guys, and I'm really happy for Wrexham. And I love the series, but I couldn't help myself. Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney are investing in Alpine, or rather, they are sort of the front of a investment group that has purchased a sizable chunk of Alpine. It's interesting. There's an article in The Athletic all about this, and it doesn't really add up to much else than sort of what you might assume. F1 is a hugely profitable sport in a very short period of time. The US market is clearly a really important one, and it turns out for teams like Alpine, it might be even more important, because these are companies that basically look at the American market, see how little penetration they have, and I guess have the most to gain from I guess exposing themselves to that market. This is part of the reason Renault was rebranded Alpine in the first place. They're also expanding into other American racing series over the next couple of years. They're planning to. And by the looks of things, this is just a strategic sort of thing for them to have a bit more American voices and experts at the table. And while the article sort of intimates that perhaps Reynolds and McElhenney might be in a similar front of camera situation, it sounds like this is much more of just a diversifying the portfolio move than our hearts are really in this, and you're going to see Rob McElhenney, doing another. There's already Drive to Survive, right? They don't need to do another series on.
Well, Welcome to
Alpine.
Wrexham is better, but
right.
Also a very different sort of thing. But I was sort of surprised that if they were going to make hay out of the fact that these guys are involved, this would sort of be the moment. And instead, the press materials and the statements they released for it are pretty boring, to be honest. Like, even by the I guess they're decently interesting by the standard of these sorts of announcements, but you would have expected these guys to be centered more in it as like characters and personalities, because that's kind of the whole point of. Well, sometimes that's the point of these celebrity-fronted investment group offers. Like Jay-Z is going to own the Nets, for instance. Boy, did that turn out to not really be true. And so that's kind of the point, is that you put a face people like on what is frequently behind the scenes the most soulless collection of capital, getting together to buy a stake. And that's not what they did here. But the flip side is, reading about this, these investment groups already have tons of ties to existing investment groups that are in other sectors in sports. Like there's Fenway Sports Connections, which is Boston and I believe Liverpool, effectively.
Okay.
So it's like, it is also this, sometimes like, if you follow this aspect of sports, doesn't it sometimes feel, Danny, like there's a handful of investment firms that are just like putting tendrils out across all of sport, but in places you can't see it. Like the teams are still there, but it's these dudes behind all these teams.
And it used to be like individual billionaires for a while, and it kind of still is. I mean, Arsenal's owner also owns like the Denver Nuggets that I think just won. Did they just win the? Yeah, and they've won. Yeah, so I think Arsenal's now the only. I think they've won a Super Bowl, the Stanley Cup, the World Series. Now, his teams have. Stan Kroenke. Whereas now more and more you're starting to see, like, I mean, in Europe and soccer, the Saudi Public Investment Fund is the big one, where they just purchased Newcastle and not to mention the Saudi League itself, which is basically an entire public entity where they basically, the Saudi Public Investment Fund has funded every team on the roster. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like more and more, it's just like this consolidation and commodification of anything that makes any money whatsoever, and especially when you're talking about the size of these funds, like just how much wealth is at the tip of the pyramid in so many petrostates, which you're kind of used to because that's what happened. There was one like family that owned all the oil fields, or there was one bunch of oligarchs that managed to split up this country before, while no one was watching. But obviously in the West as well, where you just have so much money tied up in whatever type of investment stuff. So it's I mean, the live and the live stuff and PGA is kind of another version of that as well. It's becoming impossible to avoid it. But yeah, you mentioned the fact that they're not front and center of this. That's probably also like a good play for them. The last thing they want to look like is this sort of like dog and pony show that just go around to different sports and tell the same story, right?
Although Wrexham's been successful, right? Like, wouldn't you want to say like, hey, we're going to do this with Alpine, other sponsors. Why don't you come on in?
The difference there is, the reason the Wrexham experiment is so interesting is because Wrexham operates at a scale where they genuinely run that team. They have money. And Ryan Reynolds has money and Rob helps, but they have the sort of money that they can pour into this team at this level, and the decisions they make have a meaningful impact, and they can, like, the choices they make basically can direct an entire football club. They don't have, we can take part in steering an F1 organization money. And so I think that they would have to be sensitive to. With Wrexham, it's reality TV presenting itself as a very, very good documentary, but there is a grain of truth to it. If they leaned into this with Alpine, it would be fake, and people would know that, and that would jeopardize the Wrexham project, I think.
And if you're at a certain level of wealth, right, you have a broad portfolio, and you don't need to be the one with your hand on the dial, right? Like you operate at a scale in which you have people managing a lot of this stuff for you. When you look about Reynolds and McElligott, that's like emotional capital, right? That's like time and effort and like giving a crap. And you can't like at the end of the day, they are still just two human beings, and they can't possibly like replicate what they've done at Wrexham ad nauseum. There's definitely like a hard limit to just how much time and effort and giving a crap and flying to games and flying to races, and while you're still being a parent and an actor and a whatever, right? So like I feel like they're probably already at a point where they can. This seems like it's more of the sort of the money side of things than the emotional buy-in side of things.
Well, speaking of investors. And F1 teams, Danny. What's the next one on our
I know another
here?
one. Here we go. So High Tech, which is a crowd based in Silverstone, a racing team, which has they started off from British Formula 3, and they've basically sort of they're all over the place over the past 20 years. Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4. They have submitted an application to enter the 2026 F1 season. And this is all off the back of a Kazakh businessman by the name of Vladimir Kim, who has invested a bunch of money and purchased 25% of High Tech in doing so. So this is a really interesting one because obviously we've talked a lot about the other teams that are attempting to get into the season, or into the sport rather. And there's something about this one which feels really old school to me. You know, it's like an engineering outfit, a racing outfit in the UK, which has lower league sort of, you know, receipts, I guess. Not just in Europe, they also I think are in Formula Asia and a bunch of other stuff. Getting a bunch of money and being part of the sort of like Silverstone clique as well. So they have more of an underdoggy nature, I think, than some of the other ones where you've got these large conglomerates coming in, like the Andretti bid or whatever, or ones that have like huge, brands behind them. This is a pure racing team attempting to get in. In the press release that they put out, I got this from Autosport. High Tech said that their ambition was a move that would complete its single-seater ladder and demonstrate that High Tech has all the right people, experience, resources to compete alongside the best teams in the world. So in one way, it's the inevitable endpoint of a team that has, over the past 20 years, expanded into increasingly competitive formulas over the years. But also, Vladimir Kim, by the looks of it, you know, he's a Kazakh billionaire. He's not the type of guy who is buying this team so they can win Formula 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is clearly a play for the big leagues.
Well, the other thing that just leaps out of me there is like, I don't know how close the ties are between like tycoons from Kazakhstan and the government, but like when you're talking about Kazakhstan, that is in many ways also kind of their status is kind of murky, but like we do know that like Putin sent troops into Kazakhstan to intervene, to support. I don't think you could quite call the president there a puppet, but it was like to support an ally. And so there's a weird element too of, you know, this is at a time when sport has been trying to like really push a lot of like Russian money and sponsorship out. And the High Tech bid is underwritten by a country that is not like, you know, it's not Russia, but it's like Russian aligned. And I am curious the degree to which those, like, does this become a vector of capital from like Russia back into other sports? I don't know. But this is the one place where like, oh, this is getting now more adjacent to where sport was a couple years ago.
Yeah, it is. You know, he's Kazakhstan's richest man. He owns its extraction. I think it's copper or something. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it looks like it.
So it's like, yeah, it's, you know, it's hard. It is hard, you know, to look at wealthy people from, you know, petrostates that have ties to the sort of oligarchical way of doing things, you know, without having some concerns of
just a big race fan, you know.
But look what's happened with PGA. You know what I mean? That's in broad daylight. At a certain point, this stuff is just, at the same time, like you said, where, you know, there are literal, you know, they're pulling the money out of other sports, like Chelsea with the Roman Abramovich stuff. Like, he's an oligarch who had to sell the club when the invasion of Ukraine happened. But at the same time, yeah, it's.
But I think the
happening in broad daylight.
The deal with like Saudi money though is you can be reasonably confident that Saudi Arabia is not going to be exiled from the global financial system anytime soon, and it does feel like the way things go, that could just happen with anyone like too close to like Russia's orbit. And so it'd be a slight concern if that is the money in your entire racing bid that's going to support the team. That could be a slight source of concern, but it does sort of seem like this is an organization that is well positioned to make this kind of step. And this is just where the money is right now. But yeah, it seems like, you know, it's a credible bid. But
He's got deeper pockets than Andretti.
Yeah.
That's true. And
I'm curious to see how it goes because like it does not seem like anyone in Formula One wants more teams.
no, and in a way, I wonder, will we eventually stop talking about so many of these bids? Because right now, F1 is such a ticket, and especially when you're talking about this level of wealth, it is a no-brainer to basically try your hand at getting in. And if anything, and I know I keep bringing it up, but I think the thing that shocks me about the Live PGA thing, more than say, you know, Manchester City in the Premier League or what's happening with Newcastle or whatever, is that there's at a certain level, the money is impossible to to beat with any sort of moral argument. Like, they have bought golf, and there was a moral argument against Live, but the whole thing was strategic. To basically, they set up this separate league. They gave people the type of money that is generational wealth that you just can't say no to. It's impossible as an individual. And granted,
allowed them to wear shorts.
And allowed them.
You can't say no to that either.
I didn't realize it was that also one of the.
Yeah,
that's so funny. So, like, you know, at a certain point, it's like we're operating a level where the money is so powerful that you have to just step back and have it crush you. Like, so I
mean, this guy though, Vladimir Kim, he's only number 607 in the
world.
according to Forbes.
That's nothing.
Okay,
Sorry. He's
4.6. Bill, come on.
This guy's
number one in
poor.
Kazakhstan, baby.
But like I do kind of feel like we are not going to see a new F1 team. Like, it doesn't feel like they want any of these bids. They do not want a new team. It feels like they're going to put in roadblocks they can. Because until
cash out,
every single team that might potentially be able to be sold sells, and they've exhausted the market for easy injections of like you flipping the asset, I think they are going to oppose any sort of new team. Like, I think everyone who might be thinking about next set will be like, well, me first. You're gonna, if you want in F1, you have to pay me $1 billion.
That's the thing. So that's what I'm talking about, is that that's the money. It, like, just like the individual golfers would live. Eventually, if some team wants to get in here and it's coming from that type of money, someone like
they're buying AlphaTauri.
What does Gene? Well, that's the thing. Who's going? AlphaTauri.
Gene Haas has a price. Like, come on. Like, we know this.
He has. Yeah.
like this is a man who doesn't want to spend money on repairing race cars in a racing series. Like, no, this guy is waiting for someone to show up and write a check. And so this is a huge tension. And so like, I'm interested in this bid process. I want more F1 teams, but the entire thing is engineered now to prevent that happening and to position current teams as kind of like rent seekers in this space. So it's a bit of a bummer.
Well, speaking more about teams and money, James Vowles, team principal of Williams, has been out there talking, being transparent in a way that we don't often see with Formula One teams, and certainly haven't seen with Williams recently. And he's kind of been telling the press about what he has found coming into the team as the new boss. And he's describing in this Autosport article the sort of the lineage of their design practice. So he says when a designer releases a part, it sort of goes into a black hole. And then there's emails going backwards and forwards between production to try to find out where their part is, how it's being upgraded, how big it is, and how long it will take. Normally, that would go into a digital system that can be tracked so you can actually understand what does the car get made up of. And bear in mind, there are 17,000 components, and by the time you have designers doing this 17,000 times, you get lost. So you have inefficiencies. The software to fix that, first of all, just to step back here, they don't have, they are literally just doing this over email.
Yeah.
17,000 parts. They don't have a database. It's just like paper and
If you're
pen.
good enough
Email
with
is not-
labels, you don't need a database.
See? Yeah, and bins. He says the software to fix that isn't unfortunately, £100, but millions, and even up to tens of millions if you get it right. So this is all to say and to sort of illustrate that the cost cap hit Williams at a really bad time.
Right.
Because the richer teams were able to see it coming, then spend a bunch of money on infrastructure before the cost cap arrived. But Williams at that time was just trying to stay afloat, and so they don't have now the headroom to invest in structural stuff like that. And so, as Vowles says, the cost cap itself is split into two things. There's the operational cost cap, which is about $145 million, which everyone knows and talks about. Perhaps more hidden than that, there's CapEx, capital expenditure version of the cost cap. And that's around, it's a bit complicated, but $36 million spread across 4 years. But if you like, every year you can spend 6 or 7 of that if you just do it fairly equally. So, and then now quoting from the Autosport article, that's why we're currently in the middle of a debate about an adjustment to the CapEx limit that is designed to help teams like Williams that fell behind in terms of infrastructure to catch up. With a decision to be made over the Belgian Grand Prix weekend at the end of this month. Exactly how that extra allowance will work is not yet clear. And the other thing about this is that because it has to be even, it will also go to the front runners.
Right. Okay.
Right, and I saw that like their theory, the article kind of quotes that like the idea is, well, since all those teams invested in their infrastructure, they're kind of satiated in terms of their equipment needs, so like they won't really like know what to do with the CapEx. I don't believe that for a second. I don't think that's real. Like I think that they will find places for that money to go. Now it might not be as impactful as sort of like the gap narrowing stuff that Williams wants to do. Gap narrowing might be generous. Like I don't know that having an inventory management database is necessarily going to be the silver bullet, but something that they clearly need. But yeah, it relaxing the CapEx limits seems like this is how like Mercedes and Red Bull end up turning into real estate companies effectively, as they just start investing in land and leases on facilities that they're not using. But the other part of this, though, is credit, I guess, to James Vowles for going on this PR tour of let me tell you about how messed up Williams is. Anyone who will listen, this is the second week in a row where James Vowles, maybe third week, where James Vowles has had some other little nugget of like, let me tell you about the crap I found when I opened the fridge at Williams. Let me tell you what happened when I turned on the lights in this room. And there's a bit of like, obviously this is politicking, where he's demonstrating like this is why this team needs this capital investment, like limit adjusted.
Yeah.
But also he does just seems like someone who is interested in being really frank about. Did you catch him when they always interview different team principals during race weekends? Did you catch the one where this was like 2 races ago? He was the guy they were talking to. And he was one of the most frank guys talking about what the teams know about how tires perform in, I want to say might have been Spain, might have been Monaco. But he was like giving really detailed answers about just like tire dynamics at this track and like historic patterns. And it was really fascinating. And so to a degree, like while James Vowles is in this mode, and knows, I guess, that his team doesn't have a hope in hell of, seriously taking the fight to anyone important, he's giving this really interesting look at, like, this is what's happening behind the scenes.
Have you seen what's happened on the Williams YouTube channel over the past couple of months?
No.
So they didn't produce stuff for, like, much of this year, except they have this series called The Vowles Verdict. And it's basically him doing like a super frank, honest breakdown of what just happened in the weekend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they've done maybe 3 or 4 of these. And it's just like, hey, what's up? hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is your boy, James.
Like and subscribe.
It'll be like, like he has here Inside Alex's Canada P7, The Vowles Verdict. The Monaco road trip.
I will link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, check it out. So yeah, like you said, like he's doing the press tour, but
he and Rosberg
also
need
getting
to do a
it
collab.
Oh my God, could you imagine? Maybe that's who. Did you see the one where Rosberg drove the Ferrari F40 that he found in one of his
and he's
neighbors
clearly terrified of it.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Rosberg's
he wrote
YouTube
a note
video
on the guy's windshield.
Is just a delectable mix of absolute cringe, like rich guy shit, and like really endearing rich guy shit. It's kind of a mix.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Well, let's roll right into your cost cap articles here, Rob, then.
Okay, so I feel like we might have brought this up earlier this season. We were talking about some personnel moves, people leaving the F1 teams and going to like the engineering divisions that various F1 teams have stood up. And I think we were talking about like these people are casualties of the cost cap, and like it's sort of unclear as to, is there something a little untoward happening? It seems that the FIA may have reached the conclusion that something untoward is happening, because they were effectively conducting a major audit up and down the F1 grid, asking questions about what are all those racing engineers who are no longer in the racing department but are across the hall in the engineering department. What do they do here? What can you tell me about what your workday looks like? Because the FIA is convinced that these positions are bogus, might be too strong a word, but they definitely are arguing that this is being used to do racing development and have employees like turning the gears on racing problems and then like effectively exporting that internally from these engineering divisions back to the racing team without violating the cost cap. And explicitly, this is stemming from they closed a loophole where basically you can have an engineering division. If the engineering division creates work product that is like used in the F1 racing program, that has to be charged against the cost cap, which wasn't explicit. Now it is. But this broader ranging investigation they're carrying out, and it is an investigation. This is what it sounds like, is they kind of are crawling over these teams, asking questions about these like adjacent engineering programs. And it kind of feels like they're not digging the answers they're getting.
It's kind of funny that like there's any scuttlebutt around this, because there's only been like a season of this, and already one of the teams did break the cost cap. Like this, I wonder, are they going to turn up at Red Bull and like open the canteen department, and it's just a huge fucking wind tunnel in there, and like, no, close the door, close the door. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? Like you'd wonder how much there has to be like some crossover between those things. There must be some departments where they're like fine with some crossover happens, because I don't know, like for some companies it's easier to be church and state than others, you know what I mean?
That's
like
the thing.
Red Bull is just Red Bull.
Well, so Williams might be a bad example, because remember they did explicitly spin off, I think, Williams Advanced Technologies a few years ago,
right?
Because they
Alpine might be harder,
they were flat broke,
you know,
so they spun off like profitable divisions. But yeah, I think there's questions about like some of these teams. I'm not sure they do have engineering departments that are like winning enough contracts or producing enough product to sell where they're viable organizations. Like they only work because they're part of an F1, a racing organization, effectively. And right. So I think that's where a lot of these things are getting into trouble. This isn't like I don't know, what's the point of comparison? This isn't like General Electric and 30 Rock, right? Where there's always another division that has like another 8 product lines that you can go work on. Like that's just not how these teams are set up. So when you have a racing engineer go over to their, this is our, advanced materials division. Well, who are your clients? Oh, it's the racing team. So I guess he's working on materials for car development. I think this is, this is teams sort of like clawing at the walls of the cost cap, and the FIA is shutting it down. But you know what? I hate the cost cap. So I'm actually rooting for the cheaters. I think, let the operators operate.
The heel turn. Speaking of money, once again, it's a sport about it. ESPN has drawn, it seems, strong viewership recently. This from racefans.net from ESPN. 3 of ESPN's 4 largest U.S. television audiences have come from the first races of 2023. If I'm reading this right. The record was last year's Miami Grand Prix, the inaugural Miami Grand Prix. Fake harbor and all. 2.6 million people watched. This year.
Is that just because it was on the East Coast of America? So
interestingly, the other ones that are in this group, Canadian Grand Prix,
right,
this year, 1.76 million. Miami this year, 1.96, and Monaco, which was 1.79. And I think Monaco was middle of the day. Well, no, I think it was an early morning.
Were these figures
one, but
also
it's
counting the ones that are broadcast on the major network, ABC?
Probably,
because that's the big thing is like some of these races get broadcast on terrestrial.
And I think all
TV.
of these are.
Yeah,
I think maybe not Monaco because I think maybe I don't know because the Indy 500 is that day too, so I don't know if ABC had stuff going on.
That actually makes it more impressive.
I could go back and look at the Shift+F1 Twitter. Yeah, I think though that the real I'm bearing the lead here. They have numbers from Daniel Ricciardo and Will Arnett's The Grandstand.
Oh my goodness.
114,000 people watched that.
Wow. And how many of those were people who tuned off like after 2 minutes?
That I don't know. I would love to see the
what
YouTube.
was the average session length? Yeah, give me the...
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Watch time.
Wow. Okay. It didn't totally...
Really? That sounds like it totally bombed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 5%? No. Yeah. 7%?
I guess I would need to know what does the Manning cast do relative to Monday Night Football?
Oh, God.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of your benchmark.
Or other ESPN2 content.
Yeah.
You know?
But was this wasn't simulcast, right? This was the only way ESPN were carrying the race?
No, it was simulcast.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah. They had the regular Sky feed on ESPN.
Oh, man. Can you imagine if they were just like, we're only doing the grandstand for this race?
All in.
Oh.
Yeah.
Whew.
Man. I hope the kids one is good. I hope the Nickelodeon version that they're working on. Yeah. F1 is in such a weird spot, right? Remember, like, we were talking on the podcast like 3 or 4 years ago against all these idiots that were buying F1 teams. We're like, what are you doing, you idiots? There's no money in this. Gene Haas, you might as just go to Vegas for a weekend. Like, what, you dummies? What are you doing? And then, like, God, I hope there's like good broadcasts of F1 in America because the app is broken, all this stuff. And now we're just like this crazy world where every single billionaire in the world wants an F1 team, and we have celebrities doing simulcasts of the races, and we're complaining that only 110,000 people listen.
I'm not complaining about that. I think it's very funny. I will say though, I was thinking about this. F1's popularity has not correlated to it being a better product. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not sitting here being like, boy, do I feel... My experience with F1 is so enriched by its popularity and the various choices being made to, like, leverage that. So there's kind of an odd thing where it's like, it's cool that more people are finding out F1 is cool. I'm not sure it's becoming a more cool sport in its overall direction.
There's 2 ways to cut that, right? There's the glass half empty version, which is this isn't good. Like, if all these people are watching now and the game isn't good, like, that's not a good sign. And then there's the glass half full version of, if we're having a stinker of a season and people are still entertained, this is the thing. Like, the F1 audience boom was forged in the fires of Mercedes just like sleepwalking to the championship year after year. Right. Like, this is the weirdest thing about this entire like surge in popularity is Drive to Survive made people care about a sport that was never in doubt except for 1 year, and then promptly became even less in doubt than like maybe ever before because like Red Bull took it back over. It is an odd thing, but I guess maybe in the context of
people love them Premier League, and as I understand it,
And the Yankees.
well, yeah,
Are the Yankees
No,
winning anymore?
no.
I don't know. They're always my
Well,
go-to, but
my team almost beat Man City last year. But
the
unfortunately,
Patriots? No,
no,
they're
Arsenal,
not winning either.
My boys, my good boys. Yeah.
Well,
but
speaking
yeah,
of Red Bull, should we get to Austria?
let's do it. Let's head up to the Styrian Mountains, if you will, on the foothills of the town of Graz, where Arnold Schwarzenegger was born. You can check out the Arnold Schwarzenegger Museum while you're at the race, if you want
Wow.
to, or
And
you
I
know,
will.
when you're there. We're heading to the Red Bull Ring, previously known as the A1 Ring, previously known as the Austria Ring, which means Austria Ring, just like our good friend Drew, our good friend Jason
Jason
A.
A.
Striker.
Striker.
Absolutely. Jason Austrian.
Mm-hmm.
So this was originally built in 1970. I believe it's pronounced the Zeltweg airfield circuit was the previous sort of circuit in Austria that people went to, and then that circuit, the airfield, was decommissioned and
Pretty hilly for an airfield. I'm surprised.
well, it wasn't there. It was in a different part of Austria.
Oh, well, there you go.
So then they built the Austria Ring. I'm not sure why they built it up in the middle of this beautiful plateau in the hills of Austria. But it was done so then. It had a bunch of races, but it wasn't really an F1 track until Hermann Tilke got his hands on it. And in 95, 96, they did a big redesign of it, and that's basically what it is now. It was renamed the A1 Ring in 1996, and then that's where we really started having more races there. It's a short circuit. There's 71 laps. It's 4.3 kilometers, which is just over 2.5 miles. And it's like the most simple track. Like it feels like a go-kart track. It's not very. There's as short as it is. It has even fewer turns, because you can have Monaco, which is a short track, but you're pretty much always turning a little bit. Like there's one part of the track where the straight in the back end of or the middle part of Sector 2 of Monaco. There is just a bunch of straights on this track. And you can largely divide the first half of the lap into this is the uphill part, and then the second half of the lap is this is the downhill part. It's almost like a slalom on the way down, especially that middle sector. So there are three DRS zones, and they are back to back to back. The first is on the start-finish straight. Then there's a right-hander. Then there's another big DRS zone the whole way up a big hill. Then there's a right-hander. Then there is a third DRS zone. And what that means is that most of the overtaking you'll see at the, I almost called it Austria Ring, at the Red Bull Ring, is on the end of the second and third straights. Confusingly, at the end of the second straight is turn 3, because for some reason they've decided that turn 2 is just this little bend that's in the hill up the road. And then turn 4 is the next one. Once you're past that, and turn 4 is where Albon and Hamilton had that coming together at the end of the race. You may remember when Albon was fighting for his seat at Red Bull. Once you're out of that, it's kind of tricky to do some overtaking. Bottas managed to do it at turn 6, but that's kind of like the exception that proves the rule. Generally, once you're sort of there, you're into harvest mode. You're coming downhill. There's a couple of braking zones, but there's basically no proper slow turn on this track. The slowest they get is actually at the top of that hill at turn 3. And that's by virtue of the fact that it's just a super sharp turn with a kind of a hilly apex that you go over. The rest of the turns are super fast. So this is just like a little rocket. Like this track, they just go. And as a result, there's not many obvious places for them to do recharging. So they sort of go lap by lap when it comes to the deployment of their ERS stuff. So yeah, it benefits straight line speed. So the Red Bulls are happy here. And they've always sort of been good here, but I think, unless Max or Checo decide to go into the gravel, this is about as much of a done deal, I think, for them as
Checo
possible.
does that every year. Like
That's
like Checo, it's turn 3, right? Where he's pretty convinced that he can go around the outside on this guy. And every year we have the like, is that legit? Is that in the rules? And so turn 3, I feel like last year it was Checo and Russell having the who gives racing room, that sort of thing. So there's always like something I think I've come to appreciate about this track is there are consequences for getting it wrong, but they are not race fatal ones. And so guys will try stuff, but it's not like if it goes bad, you're immediately in red flag territory or like full course caution safety car. So you like, I think at a time where a lot of tracks have ended up in this situation where it's so hard to pass or even contemplate a move that nobody even tries it really, because like, the percentages are too bad or you lose too much time. Austria still feels like a place where over the course of a race, you're going to see guys convince themselves like, I can stick it. Full send.
Yeah, full send. There is something about that turn 3, about the second DRS, because it's uphill as well, and it's so long. I feel like the one thing that might be Checo's saving grace this week is just how powerful that DRS is.
That's true. Red Bull's straight line speed advantage hasn't, like, there's been nothing like it since the early years of the Mercedes hybrid.
So, but I do think we will get overtaking. I don't think we're going to get famous last words, and I'll knock on wood here. But for some reason, I don't think this is a track where we're going to see the DRS train issue. I think people will go wide on each other and even just get out of the air going up that hill. And there is different, because it's sort of like off camber, it's like a weird little up the right hander. You can barely see it actually where the track is. And because they're attacking going down into turn 4, they do often take different lines and break at different points there. So, and it's wide. It's a wide track too. So I am optimistic that we will see overtaking in that sort of part of the track. But I am also fairly sure that Red Bull should make it an easy one too, as long as they don't do something silly. Famous last words.
Well, the track may be simple, but the weather looks complicated.
Oh, well, then everything I said has a big asterisk when it comes to if the weather is messed up.
Yeah, so this is a sprint weekend.
Oh.
Yes. So
second
on
asterisk.
Friday is when qualifying will happen. And at qualifying time, the temperature looks just fine, 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 Celsius, but precipitation, 80%. We get scattered showers.
Wow.
On Friday, light wind, however. On Saturday, where the sprint shootout and the sprint will happen, we've got temperatures in the low 60s, or if you're Celsius, around 16 or 17 Celsius. And precipitation starts high around the shootout time, 84%, and then drops around the sprint to 48%. So not nothing.
Right.
Sunday, though, a little less precipitation, looks to be about 24% at the time of the race, but back up to the warmer temperatures of 73 Fahrenheit or 23 Celsius. So
but that's interesting, because then that means we could have a messed up rainy qualifying like we had in Canada, and that's for the main race, right? Friday qualifying is for Sunday, right?
Correct. Yeah. So who knows? Heading into the weekend, though, the driver standings look like this. Max Verstappen is on top with 195 points. Sergio Perez, his teammate, has 126. Fernando Alonso in third place with 117. Lewis Hamilton in fourth with 102. And Sainz in fifth with 68. George Russell right behind him with 65. Charles Leclerc has 54. Lance Stroll has 37. Esteban Ocon has 29. Gasly in 10th place with 15 points. Behind him, we've got Norris with 12, Albon with 7 after his Canadian Grand Prix heroics. Hülkenberg has 6. Piastri and Bottas are tied with 5 points. And then in 16th place, we've got Zhou with 4, Tsunoda and Magnussen with 2, and then De Vries and Sargent with 0. In the constructor standings, Red Bull Racing is on top with 321 points. Mercedes in second with 167. Aston Martin is closing in with 154 points in third place. Ferrari's in fourth with 122, and then a jump down to Alpine in fifth with 44. McLaren is in sixth with 17. Alfa Romeo has 9. Gene Haas and team have 8. Williams has 7, and AlphaTauri with 2. If you'd like to join the standings yourself, you can do so in our fantasy league using the link in the show notes. Should we take it to emails, Rob?
Absolutely. Our first one comes from Colin from Canada with a little PSA for anime. Colin writes, with the Redline podcast happening, I thought I'd bring you some news from the world of motorsports anime. Normally, there's nothing happening in that space. But recently, 2 new shows were announced with some level of backing from the Japanese racing industry. The first, Overtake, is about Japanese Formula 4 racing and race photography. Notably, it's being created by Studio Troika and much of the leadership team who created Mecha Anime. What's this say?
Noah
Zero. It's currently set to air this fall. The trailer for this one actually looks kind of good, y'all.
Okay. I'm going to put it in the show notes. Overtake with an exclamation point.
Yeah, this one looks real. Colin writes, the next one does not look so real. There's also High Speed Etoile, which certainly is very anime. Despite having backing from Super Formula, it's about a sci-fi fictional racing league, as far as I can tell. There's also no studio or staff announced to be working on the project, which is usually a bad sign. There's just a future 2024 date attached to the show. This trailer looks like crap, I'll be honest. It's like when you hear people talking about I hate how much anime is just relying on computer animation at this point, and just really crap rigging. They're talking about shows that look like this, is kind of the vibe here. Colin continues, I've also got to take this chance to shout out 1991 classic Future GPX Cyber Formula. It's mostly just a solid sports anime style show that shares some interesting lineage with Gundam production staff. Coincidentally, there's also a character named Knight Shoemaker. Despite airing at the same time as Schumacher's debut in F1, it's something like 70 episodes and 2 OVAs long if you ever run out of content for bonus pods. Oh man, guys, when we have to break glass, in a year's time, when we're we've just watched, the only thing left is the pure untrammeled racism, Cannonball Run 1. I think we could just turn the Patreon shows into a watch along of this anime. It looks cool.
Yeah. Okay. I'm definitely going to put those trailers in the show notes. I can't wait to watch them.
Stick them in the docket. Stick it in our Patreon.
We've had
ideas.
Just to pull back the curtain a little bit here. We've had Initial D on that document
I've
for
never
a while.
seen that.
We have.
Kind of I keep sitting here being is this the month that we're going to do Initial D? We haven't.
We should read the entire manga series. That's what we should do.
I'm assuming that the joke there is it's endless.
I think it's 200. Yeah. I've seen them in a couple of shops, and it's It's pretty intense.
Danny, you want to read this next one?
Sure, yeah. This one comes in from Chris K. I'm an F1 noob. This is my first year following and watching an entire season. Your podcast is the most welcoming of all, so thank you. Thank you, Chris. My question is probably embarrassing, and the answer is probably obvious, but I'd love to hear you guys answer it. There's no such thing as bad questions, Chris. Send them in, everyone. Chris continues, a lot of the talk this week was about the removed chicane in the final turns at Barcelona. It seems to have improved the race and definitely kept the speeds up. Everyone complains that Monaco is too slow, so why not remove the chicane after the tunnel? I'm sure there is a legitimate reason it exists, but wouldn't removing it make the race faster and more exciting? Is it a safety issue? Love you guys and keep up the good work. This is a great question, Chris. Let me answer it in 2 sort of ways. So that chicane is called a Nouvelle chicane. I'll talk about it. Yeah, in Monaco. I'll talk about its history in a second because there is a legitimate reason why it's there. So the issue, I'd say, just to first of all talk about what the problem maybe here is, that Monaco is too slow. I think you can have slow races that are still competitive. I think the problem you have at Monaco with the current cars, as wide and long as they are, is that there's no place on the track that has enough of a straight section and is wide enough for there to be either overtakes on a straight or different sort of ways to tackle a turn. There's pretty much one racing line in Monaco, and there's a couple of places where you could cut people off to overtake. And interestingly, one of them is actually the New Vowles chicane where it is. It looks like it's, I hear what you're saying. Maybe if you went faster down the port, but there's no turn after that. If you were to straighten it out, that would allow you to get on a different line. You'd have to overtake on the track there, and it's really not wide enough. So the reason why that exists is Lorenzo Bandini, when he died in 1967, this is a horrific crash that happened in Monaco. He basically died of third-degree burns. The car flipped over, caught on fire, bunch of hay bales. It happened at what was known as the port chicane, which was the chicane that was there. It was a little bit further down. It's kind of, you can see where it kind of was based on where the sort of the fence is there. In fact, in recent, like 10 years ago, they also redid that. Do you remember? There used to be a wall there and a couple of people drove straight into it. I forget who it was. And they've opened it up now. So the cars instead will drive down. It's almost like an exit road, like we saw in Canada, where they missed a turn and just go straight. So when Bandini died, there was sort of calls for that to be changed for a long, long time. And it took until 1986 for them to build that new chicane. So the reason the chicane is actually there is for safety reasons, because they were coming out of that tunnel, going down the hill, and then the point, imagine instead of braking at the bottom of the hill, they were racing down to a much tighter chicane that was an extra like 200, 300 feet down the way. And it was also a chicane you could take at speed. It wasn't like the chicane at the end of the tunnel is super dramatic. It's not really a chicane. It's kind of like a chicane, and then you have to turn around like an invisible roundabout that's there, right? You have to go squidge around it a little bit. Before the port chicane was actually a fairly straight a chicane that if you hit it at speed at a certain angle, you might be able to get through it. So it was inviting crashes. And so that's the reason it actually exists, is for safety reasons. But I think even if there was, I can see if there was like a safer way to expand that, maybe it could happen, but I don't think you want people attempting it there. I mean, that part of Monaco historically has always had messed up crashes, cars going into the water, of course, in the past as well. But I think Monaco's problems are kind of insurmountable. I don't know what you could do to Monaco to make it faster, short of maybe, could you get rid of turn 1 the way it is? Would that make it possible to overtake going up the hill?
I think they just need to eminent domain some of the like housing casinos and just open this thing up a little bit. And I will also say, like, where chicanes appear in F1 or racing anywhere, usually the answer is safety. Like a chicane pops up when people are realizing we need to make this slower. I think the most famous example is there are 2 chicanes in the Mulsanne Straight at Le Mans. Those didn't used to be there. It was too unfit. Like you could not make that circuit safe with an uninterrupted straight shot down the Mulsanne Straight with the speeds the cars would attain. Like adding the chicanes basically forced the cars to check up and resume their acceleration curves. And so, like, this is, I think, Monza as well is another case where there are chicanes there in part because otherwise the thing is a particle accelerator with cars running on it.
Right.
And so
Paul Ricard is another example of that in a way. It's not necessarily a chicane, but it's a turn that's been stuck on a huge straight for the exact reason as what you just mentioned.
Yeah. It pretty much is always like, if we don't do something to sort of check the momentum of these cars, there is another possible crash like nearby. Because like the way they design F1 courses is you're always trying to basically control. Crashes are inevitable. You want to make sure the crashes that happen are the ones that you want to happen, that you effectively designed when things go wrong and when cars crash. Here's where that is going to happen, and here is the way they're going to make contact with the barrier. And chicanes are partly how they control that. Drew, you want to read this next one?
Yes, indeed. This is Jorgen from North Dakota who says, in the endless battle to make races better and more exciting, there has been a thought that has been in my head for a while. Will F1 ever move to make the cars smaller? Kind of dovetailing off of our Monaco discussion. It has been noted extensively that they are bigger and wider than ever before. I feel like this is limiting racing, whether it is the extreme wake the cars throw up behind them or the simple fact that most of the tracks are not big or wide enough to handle side-by-side racing for long periods of time. Formula 2, while of course being very different from Formula 1, has a ton of very exciting 2-wide, even 3-wide battles for much more of a lap. I feel a lot of that is due to the cars being small enough to be able to fit on the track. Is it at all possible that the FIA and the regulations move to make cars smaller? I understand that the bigger cars may allow them to be safer at the speeds of the cars as the speeds of the cars continue to increase. But maybe it's time to sacrifice speed for better racing. Thoughts? I think you've hit on one thing for sure, is that I think there is a direct correlation here with the speed to the size, because there is a certain safety thing. Again, we're back to safety here, where the crash structure, the monocoque, the cockpit that the driver sits in, has to be able to withstand certain forces in the event of a crash, right? And so that has to be, of a certain hardness, structural integrity, and that's heavy. So, it's carbon fiber. And thus to both have that and to be able to go at the speeds that Formula One fans have come to expect, I think the natural conclusion is a car that looks like what we have. I do think that the size thing would probably help, especially in cases like Monaco. Although I think when you look at something like Formula 2 or Formula 3, those are spec series cars. Yeah. And so they're all very theoretically identical in terms of performance. And that's also not what Formula 1 is. So yeah, it's a tricky dance.
I wonder if there's a couple of things. Sorry, Rob, I'll get it out of the way quickly, because I'm no engineer when it comes to this sort of stuff. There's a couple of things that come to mind. One was the survival cell, as you mentioned. Two is the fact that there's a hybrid powertrain. The F1 cars are hybrids. F2 aren't. So the ERS systems, all that sort of stuff, I imagine takes up a bit of space. Yeah, batteries, all that type of thing. And then the other thing that came to mind with regard to the current cars, because they are bigger than previous cars, is I wonder, with the sort of readoption of ground effect and the new wheels and all that sort of stuff, has all that just sort of added to it a bit? The cars are less high in my head. I might be wrong, but I feel like the cars ride not the ride height, but the sort of height of the car is lower. I feel like when I think about old F1 cars, they do sort of like angle up a lot at the back, and that's where a lot of the meat and potatoes is. So I wonder if in squishing the so I wonder if in squishing it down, it's sort of squatted it out. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, this is that is a really good point. Like, so a number of drivers have actually been talking about this, because genuinely, I think between the lines, nobody likes these new cars. Like, nobody likes driving them. Like, Max is happy because he's winning, but I also don't get a big sense that anybody up and down the grid really enjoys the ground effect spec. They enjoy these tires. I don't think anyone really likes the dynamics of these cars. And so they were answering questions a few weeks ago about this, just a couple weeks ago, about can we bring the weight of the cars down too? Because like, this is the other part. Like, there's the size of them, and then there's the fact that they are kind of hulking. They tend to lurch. They have a lot of inertia. And George Russell and a number of the drivers have talked about this as a real priority for them. Like, the cars have gotten too big. We need to get a little closer to what the classic F1 form factor, so that there is a bit more what we call proper racing. But I think, Max had a pretty decent response to that. He said, I think he's right. He said, honestly, that's going to be a bit unrealistic to achieve, because otherwise we wouldn't have been this heavy anyway, right? And then he points out, also in 2026, with the bigger battery, that will weigh a lot more. So I'm not sure that's heading in the right direction. I'll always be in favor of lighting cars, because I really enjoyed the 21 car more than what we have now in terms of how agile it was. Now the car in the low speeds is a bit of a boat. But yeah, I think like with the move to more hybrid systems, with just the direction they've gone and the safety requirements they're meeting, unwinding this is going to be really hard, especially once you've introduced things for safety regulations. Really hard to undo them.
Yeah.
Like, really hard to justify, you know what, we're actually okay, like running the risk of gnarlier and scarier accidents because the sport is suffering. I think, like, there are times that you can make the case that, you know, you're talking about very few, like, really dangerous accidents happening overall, but Antoine Hubert wasn't that long ago, you know, in slower cars. So it's something that they're really sensitive to. I think it's clearly, everyone knows this is having a deleterious effect on the racing. Everyone also knows it's going to be really hard to unwind it with the technical and safety regulations they're operating under. Last email here. I might edit this live as I go through it, but it is a fun email from Chris, who wanted to share the details of their trip to Le Mans. I went to Le Mans last week for the first time. I thought I should share my experience for anybody thinking of taking the trip. For reference, I'd previously been to about 5 F1 races over the past decade and 1 Formula E race. I'm pretty new to endurance racing, having only watched the Daytona 24 on TV till last year when myself and the group put this trip together. We arrived on the Thursday just in time to catch free practice 3 and left on the Sunday after the race. We were camping in one of a few campsites located inside the track. We were at Beausejour, just by the Porsche Curves, which is the biggest of the campsites. Compared to other races I've camped at before, Silverstone, Spa, this was more Spartan. No electricity, temporary toilet blocks, a very patchy internet, but more pleasant. We had nice neighbors, apart from the Eurobeat from the drunk Germans next door. The toilets were cleaned regularly, and there were plenty of water points nearby. We were in a camper van, but I saw lots of people who had driven down who were staying in tents. The vibe of the campsite was kind of amazing. Everyone had brought their own cars to show off, from the dustiest shitbox Citroens to Aston Martins and Lamborghinis. It was kind of amazing seeing such a range of wealth brackets in such a cheap campsite. I think we paid £40 for the whole week.
That's awesome.
A general admission ticket for the week cost €90. And if I remember rightly, the grandstands were about $150. We had general admission, but if I went again, I'd probably go for a grandstand. You probably spend most of your time roving around, as there are tons of great places to watch the cars from. But it would be handy to have a base, especially for the start of the race. In general, it was busy but not overwhelming, with the exception of the race start. I ended up watching the race for several hours, going back to the campsite with my group for dinner, and then watching a few hours into the night before heading to bed around midnight. I got up at 4 a.m. to watch the cars at dawn, and honestly, it's an incredible feeling watching these cars as the sun comes up. By then, it wasn't busy, so I spent a few hours watching from the terraces in front of the pits. I wandered around the rest of the track as the day wore on, begged some sun cream from a kindly stranger because I forgot mine in my tent, and was elated as a Ferrari crossed the line in first despite a dodgy pit stop threatening to end their race. I'll also add that the NASCAR Cup car was an absolute delight as it tore past every 4 minutes. At the campsite, you could hear the general hum of the cars going around, and it was comforting to hear the vroom of the Camaro, knowing it was still going. In the end, it had a gearbox issue with 4-ish hours to go, and they spent an hour or so fixing it. But on pace, it was something like 5 seconds a lap quicker than all the GT cars in quali trim. Sorry I've let this ramble on a bit, but in summary, this was an incredible experience and really unlike anything else in motorsport. It's by far the best racing event I've ever attended. In general, the organization felt a lot better than races I'd attended at Barcelona and Silverstone, and even at the end of the race, the toilets were clean, and everybody in the campsite cleaned up after themselves. If anybody is feeling disillusioned with high ticket prices, poor organization, and lack of competition at the top of F1, I'd absolutely recommend going to Le Mans at some point, with the caveat you need to be okay with camping and not getting too much sleep. That sounds magical.
That's awesome.
Wow.
Boys, we're going to France.
Once in my life.
You know what? I want to go. I want to go to the fairground. And flirt with one of the driver's wives.
Yeah, just walk right into that weird concession area.
This is referencing the Le Mans movie, of course.
It wasn't the driver's wife. It was the driver's widow.
That sounds good.
Key difference. He wasn't just...
Sorry, it was the driver.
It wasn't like her husband was out there rolling around and he was like macking on her. It was more like, sorry about that time I sent your husband to die a fiery death here at Le Mans.
Yeah. Do you want to go on the carousel?
That's Steve McQueen.
Fantastic. Thank you for the emails. Shift+F1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up on the socials using the links in the show notes. That's us around the internet. Should we take it around the world, Danny?
Let's race around the world. Yeah.
The World Superbike Championship is in the UK this week at the Castle Donington.
Yes. Yes.
The Donington Park Circuit. Formula 2 and Formula 3 will be joining Formula 1 at the Red Bull Ring.
Boy, oh boy.
The NASCAR Xfinity Series is on the Chicago Street Course.
Oh, dear Lord.
For
Did Liberty set this up?
Hang on.
the
Well, I'm
Loop
opening YouTube
121.
TV right now to just bookmark. I'm put. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Let's see, Motocross Grand Prix, always a fun time. Where is this? The Motocross Grand Prix of Lombok in Selaparang, Mataram City, West Nusa Tenggara,
He's making this up.
Indonesia.
Awesome. Love it.
IndyCar is at Mid-Ohio this weekend at the Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course. The FIA World Rally Cross Championship is in Holias Motorstadion in Sweden for the World Rally Cross of Sweden. And we got NASCAR.
In Chicago, the windy,
Also
windy
on
city.
the great streets of Chicago.
Al Capone, true American.
Getting that real beef at the Grant Park 220.
Season 3 of The Bear.
Quando
They should just throw it. They should blow it all up and start a NASCAR team.
Yeah. Oh man. But Formula 1 is also on this weekend. Maybe you want to watch. Things kick off. It is a sprint weekend, so buckle up. Free Practice 1 starts Friday, June 30th at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2, followed by qualifying at 11 a.m., also on ESPN2. Saturday, July 1st, the shootout. That's right.
Ooh.
The qualifying for the sprint, and only the sprint, is at 6 a.m. on Saturday on ESPN2 Eastern Time, followed by the sprint itself at 10:30 a.m. on ESPN. But the race, everyone, Sunday, July 2nd, 9 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPN.
Good stuff. A lot of racing this weekend.
Indeed. But that's what's happening in the future. Danny, what has happened in the past?
On this day, June 28th, Jack Brabham started his own racing team in 1962, but it was not the Australian driver who took the team's first World Championship victory. That honour fell to American driver Dan Gurdy, who won the French Grand Prix at Rouen today in 1964. Gurney also took victory at the Mexican Grand Prix that year as the team began to establish itself as a force in the sport. After being beaten to pole position for the 1998 French Grand Prix by one-lap specialist Mika Hakkinen, Michael Schumacher had his revenge on this day when he took his first when he took the victory. His teammate Eddie Irvine, shout out to Ireland, finished second, giving Ferrari their first 1-2 finish since the Spanish Grand Prix in 1990 when Alain Prost led home Nigel Mansell. Imagine that, an 8-year gap between 1-2s for Ferrari. But that was back in the day where they did 3 Grand Prix a year.
An
Not
8-year
really,
gap between
but,
Ferrari
yeah.
1-2s, Danny, I can't imagine it.
I know, an 8-year gap. What could you imagine? Could you imagine such
I think
a
you're still
thing?
talking about Dan Gurney, and then you were talking about Mika Hakkinen, and I was like, damn, Dan's best days were ahead of him, I guess. I didn't realize that he was mixing up with Mika.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I like to editorialize a little bit. Mix it up, you know?
Well, final thoughts heading into Austria, Danny.
I hope all the very sure things I said about this race end up being accurate. But more than that, I hope it rains, Drew. I hope it rains.
Mm-hmm. Final thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, I'm also extremely pro rain, and I'm also extremely pro people writing their race course experiences with particular attention
Amen.
paid to how well are those lavatories being handled, because let's be real, folks.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of us like the idea of like, yeah, camping sounds like fun, but we all have that little thought of what if it's gnarlier than I want to deal with? And so it's really good to let people know just how comfortable they're gonna feel while at a race campsite.
I bet Rob feels this way. I feel this way, and I bet you do too, Drew. I bet we'd love to hear if somebody went to the Austrian Grand Prix. I think we're all secretly wanting to go to that Grand Prix. I think that'd be a fun one. If you're going and you're listening,
It looks beautiful.
Send us an email. Send us some
Wait
photos.
a second though. Wasn't it last year or the year before where we got some real reports of like truly like douchebaggy behaviors in the campsites at Austria?
Oh, yes.
Like
Was that
beyond
Austria
just like
site?
weird Max fan stuff, but just genuinely like that place
Oh,
being
no.
a like asshole like
Oh, no.
magnet.
It's
Well.
the worst case scenario. You go to visit a beautiful Austrian village, and suddenly there are Nazi flags everywhere, and you're like, "Oh no!"
I don't think that was the insinuation.
That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying when I have my nightmares about visiting Austria, that's what it is. So
Is it a recurring dream for you, Danny?
yes, it is. Look, I'm in therapy. Okay, Drew. I'm dealing with my problems
Okay.
and sharing them. On the podcast.
Well, hopefully your problems can be alleviated by visiting some amazing live motorsport. If you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes in the official Shift F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Meow.